do Mises.org, autor dos livros It's a Jetsons World, Private Miracles and Public Crimes, que seria mais ou menos o mundo dos Jetsons, né? Milagres privados e crimes públicos, e também do livro Bourbon for Breakfast, Living Outside the Status Quo, que ele faz uma brincadeira, né? Tipo, vou tomar conhaque de café da manhã, vou viver fora, não do status quo, o trocadilho que ele fala status, vou viver fora desse mundo em que o Estado tem tanto peso. Vou chamar para conversar com a gente agora o Jeffrey Tucker.
Well, first, my profound apologies for speaking in English. I wish I knew Portuguese, and now I have the inspiration to attempt to learn. So we'll see. Over the next year, I think I will try more. And so next year, when I return, hopefully, I will be able to say at least a few sentences in Portuguese. That is my ambition. That's my goal. So I would like to especially thank Mises Brazil for a wonderful welcome to this such a beautiful country. Yesterday, we went to the market, and I had one of the greatest days I can remember ever. This is, you know, all these fruits and vegetables and meats and fabulous things for sale, and exchanges taking place all over the place. And we went to the stock market, and it was energizing and thrilling. The only thing that I have to say about the digital age that I find slightly regrettable is that trade is less tangible now than in a place like this market, where you can really see how exchange enhances human welfare and how private ownership empowers people, and how without exchange we would all suffer so tremendously. So to go into a market like that and see things happening is invigorating and exciting. And there you see a place where the Austrian school is alive and living and thriving. And if you're looking for a theory of economics to explain something like what you see in that market, you're not going to find it in any conventional economics textbook. The only school that could really explain and account for the kind of behavior you see in a place like that is the Austrian school, which is precisely what drew me in the first place to the Austrian school, and what draws you to it as well. So there was a thrilling experience. I've also seen in Sao Paulo the same thing in many ways that I've seen everywhere I've ever visited anywhere on the planet, namely that everything that is beautiful and enhancing of human well-being and innovative and creative and makes our lives better extends from, of course, the private sector and the market economy. And so it is in Brazil. And everything that's terrible, you know, everything that is destructive and taking life out of people and institutions extends from the state. And I have, maybe this will not surprise you, in this sense, Brazil is exactly like the United States, which is exactly like Singapore and exactly like Austria itself. So this is a universal problem. Always and everywhere, it's the same situation. The market versus the state. It's the paradigm through which you can understand, I think, the whole of human history and the whole of our contemporary lives. So I've been asked to talk today about this most extraordinary topic called intellectual property, which turns out to be a little bit complicated. And I'm passionate about it because it took me so many years to come to understand it. So as a way of introducing the topic, I would like to put you through a quick mind experiment to think about something very profoundly. And it is this. It is my plan to destroy this conference, to shut it down completely. And it will go like this. I will assign myself the role of a benevolent dictator. And I will extend to each of you in this room a wonderful thing. or so I will tell you. And it is the right, the exclusive right of each one of you to own your ideas. And you are very grateful to me for this wonderful extension of human rights to your ideas, because ideas are very important to each one of you. And so I tell you that each of your ideas belongs to you, but you must claim them by expressing them. And once you express them, they belong to you exclusively. And anybody else in this room who wants to use the same idea will have to approach you and ask your permission. And when that happens, you will be in a position to decide whether that person can use that idea and the terms under which they may use it. This is currently not a problem right now because nobody is speaking. We are not exchanging, are we? So nothing has changed. I'm the only one talking. So I have total monopoly on the ideas in this room. Now, it's true that each of you has ideas in your head, and if I could visualize those, like, for example, if you've ever been to a CAT scan at the doctor, you have to drink a juice, like, and then the juice goes into your system, and then the x-ray x-rays you, and then you see the colors of your organs and the stuff inside you, like this. So imagine I could give you a juice, you drink it, and your ideas suddenly, you can see them. So there are ideas springing out of each of your heads everywhere. But they are not mixing with each other because you're not talking to each other. So far, you all retain total possession of your ideas, but it's not a problem because you're not trading ideas. But then, I finish talking and you go out into the hallway. Now, we see that very interesting things would begin to happen. Nobody has said anything yet, so the first thing you have to do is homestead your idea. So you want to be the first one to say something, so that way you can take possession of it and be the exclusive user of it. So somebody blurts out, the source of interest rates is time preference. And then that person owns that idea. And if somebody else wants to use that idea, he has to approach him and ask his permission. Now, this is a big hallway out there, but when I said exclusive ideas, that doesn't mean that you have to have heard the idea before you refrain from using it again. It means that anybody who uses an idea who's attending this conference becomes the exclusive owner of it. That doesn't mean you have to have heard it before. So somebody on this side of the room could say that time preference is the result of human time preference, or interest rates result from time preference. And this person over here may not have heard him, but he is forbidden from using that same idea unless he approaches him and asks permission, okay? So this goes on and on like this. So there's initially probably a mad rush. Well, let's think about what would happen. I would predict several effects. One is that you would have to have a great deal of monitors. I would have to have many sort of idea police scattered throughout the crowd to make sure that nobody is stealing anybody else's ideas. That'd be the first thing. So it would become a kind of miniature police state. I mean, you'd have to have practically one person assigned to like every 2 people to make sure this wasn't happening. So that's one thing. We would all lose the ability to, the sense of the freedom to speak in any kind of liberal way. Another thing is that there would be initially a sort of chaotic, almost cacophonous sound would rise up because everybody would be frantically trying to be the first one to claim the idea, so you could be the exclusive user of it. So you probably have to have some kind of controls. Could we please slow down this conversation? Everybody quiet down your voices. Nobody can hear anything. And the monitors are not able to make good records of who's had what thought when. Another thing that would happen is that since everything you say you have to ask permission for, the conversations would dramatically slow. I mean, you would be talking to somebody and somebody would occur to you and you'd think, I don't want to steal somebody's ideas. So let me first go ask the monitors whether I'm permitted to say this. Maybe somebody has already said this. So everything would become extremely slow. Now, if you continue to think about this, you would realize, of course, that under these conditions, where I had granted you these beautiful rights to the exclusive use of your ideas, this conference would be completely and totally wrecked. It would shut down totally. And everybody would just have to go home because there would be no real exchange taking place at all. So we'd get a great imposition of power with monitors all over the place. We'd have a dramatic slowing down of the exchanges of ideas between us. And finally, we would have a total shutdown of the purposes of this conference. Now, what I would suggest to you is that this is exactly the result of the imposition of intellectual property in any country, anywhere, that this has been seriously tried. It slows economic growth, it leads to a police state, and it crushes the whole purpose of economic exchange. It leads to utter and total stagnation. If you take this idea seriously, you can destroy civilization itself. And that is precisely what is going on every day and everywhere where intellectual property is being enforced. By intellectual property, I mean three institutions: patents, copyrights, and trademarks. All three extend from the same idea that there should be ownership in ideas. How is it that libertarians could have ever supported this idea of intellectual property? Well, it's not a difficult thing to imagine, actually. It's just a small intellectual error. And it hasn't become that important to us until the digital age, when everybody in the world, 7 billion people, can potentially exchange ideas with each other every second of the day. Now we are more aware than ever of the error of this problem. But for many, many years, there was a great deal of confusion about this. For example, the great novelist and thinker Ayn Rand, and I'm a big fan of her work, made this mistake. She believed that intellectual property is the most fundamental of all forms of ownership. And even today, there are many, many libertarians who are still under the impression that intellectual property is compatible with the libertarian idea. In terms of the Austrian tradition, let me quickly lay out for you a small history of how this idea has taken shape. In 1870, when Karl Menger's book Principles of Economics came out, he did not address the subject of patents or copyrights or intellectual property. But in his first chapter, he did address the extremely important subject of what constitutes a good. What is an economic good? And this is really the fundamental things. You know, one of the things that's great about this whole subject of intellectual property, it helps you think about fundamentals. You know, you think you have it all figured out, you know, and then it turns out there's a profound confusion on something as basic as what is private property and what is a good. It constantly causes us to return to the basics and think even harder. And that's what's beautiful about this topic. And I would suggest to you, even if you feel like you disagree with me, this lecture will not be a waste to you, because it will cause you to think very hard about some subjects that are very serious, even if you come to a different conclusion than I have. So if you read Menger's chapter on what is a good, he has several traits of what constitutes an economic good, but one of them is that that good is scarce. This does not mean that it is just in short supply. It means, for example, all the fruits that I ate yesterday at the market are in extreme short supply in the United States, I can tell you. We have only a handful of decent fruits at all, actually. Actually, most of them are terrible. I thought I'd had fruits in the past. I've never had a real fruit until I came to Brazil. It's amazing. Anyway, so I don't mean that they're in short supply. I mean that they're scarce in the sense that they can only be possessed by one owner at a time, which is to say that it's a material object. For example, and this is why socialism is just stupid, by the way. For example, I think I'm the only person in this room who has a bow tie. And what if somebody came along, and so somebody says, well, obviously that bow tie is extremely scarce. I say, yeah, I completely agree. And he says, well, I think we should have socialism in that bow tie. And we all agree. Yeah, let's have socialism in this bow tie. What are we going to do then? What happens next? I mean, if I give it to somebody else, I no longer have it. And the person who has it is the only one who has it. It would be impossible to have, because why? Because it's a scarce good. And with scarce goods, you have to allocate them and with some sort of assignment of property rights. This bow tie is mine. If I give it to somebody else, then that bow tie becomes that person's, and so on and so on. Only one owner of this bow tie at a time. Now, somebody can go out and make another bow tie, and that's great, but then that too becomes an exclusive good. So it's a scarce in the sense that there will always be conflicts over the assignment of rights to that thing in question. That's what makes something an economic good. If there is no conflict, there is no problem. And then, sure, you can have socialism. It's fine. I mean, if I could just somehow will, by pointing my finger to everybody and a bow tie would immediately appear on your neck, okay? Then we could have bow tie socialism with no problem at all, no conflicts. But so long as there's going to be a conflict, we have to have assignment of property rights. So this was Menger's theory. And then he went on to explain what economics is and how it works in a world of scarce goods. This is, by the way, this is the fundamental problem with practically everybody on the what's called the left today, the political left. They don't get this idea of scarcity. I mean, so long as things are scarce, so long as it's true that if I'm wearing my shoes, you can't wear my shoes, and if you're wearing my shoes, then I can't wear my shoes. So long as that's true, there will be always scarcity. And I think that the left doesn't somehow come to terms with this fundamental fact. We can either exchange with each other using money, or we can kill each other. Those are the only two ways to resolve the problem of scarcity in this world. I prefer the peaceful way of exchange and production. This is a great way to do it. If you don't like that, then you're advocating, whether you know it or not, some kind of violent society that's going to lead to a sort of a diminishment of human life. Anyway, so I think if the left really understood the problem of scarcity, then I think we wouldn't have any conflicts. So everybody would be a libertarian. Everybody would be an Austrian. So now the question becomes, does this idea of scarcity apply to ideas? And the answer to that is no, it does not. Once an idea is stated outright, it can be multiplied and reproduced and copied unto infinity, without end. So that, for example, any sentence that I say in this lecture today, you can go home and you can say it also. And I will not suddenly find myself tonight unable to say that same sentence. Can you imagine if that were true? I was sitting in my hotel and I wanted to say what I just said just now, and oh, somebody must have taken my idea. So ideas are just like, and by the way, in all of human history, anytime you find somebody who's able to somehow magically take a good and multiply it infinitely to meet all human needs is considered a prophet, because it is a beautiful thing to see. I mean, you only need to think about this scene that occurs in the Bible where Jesus is giving a very long lecture and the people listening are getting very hungry, and one of his followers says, I would be happy to feed everybody, but I only have 2 fish and a loaf of bread. And Jesus does something, we don't know what happens, but he causes these to multiply infinitely and make everybody enormously happy, and there's your lunch. Everybody has this lunch automatically. This is the multiplication of property. So the loaves and the fishes in that story become non-scarce goods. Okay? So in the world of ideas, and this is what's beautiful about the world of ideas, there's an infinite number of these things that can be reproduced and reproduced and copied and copied and copied again. And in the digital age, since about 1995, we've seen a migration of so many of the goods and services we purchase out of the world of physical world into the digital world, where in the digital world, everything is just like ideas in the sense that it becomes infinitely multipliable, infinitely copyable. Sometimes this confuses me. Some years ago, I said to my mother, Mom, I would like to send you some pictures of my children on email. And she said, I would love to see them, but I don't want to take them from you, so please, I'll just see them next time I'm in town. I said, no, I mean, well, Mom, I'll just put it in an email and click send, and then you'll have it. And then, I mean, I'll have it too. And then you can send it to your sister, and then she can have it, but you can have it too. And she said, well, I don't understand that. How could that possibly work? You know. I mean, this is why people get confused about this topic. Anyway, so Menger had it right. And so far as I know, the only Austrian who has really thoroughly followed up on Menger's essential insight that the reason for economic goods, the reason for private property is scarcity, is Hans Hermann Hoppe. I think he's the only thinker, or I should say the first thinker, who really followed up on Menger's ideas here, okay? So now let's remember that patents and copyrights are relatively new. So that they only became globally enforced in the 20th century. Before then, they weren't. They're only enforced nationally. They weren't enforced at all on the continent throughout the first half of the 19th century or any time before then. In the US, they were very lightly enforced at all. I'm very pleased to hear this wonderful news that in Brazil, they're hardly enforced at all. And if you're depressed about the future of the Brazilian economy and you want to think about a happy thing, you just think about that. That's a wonderful thing. Brazil has this very much going for it. Very little enforcement of intellectual property. That is something wonderful. Everybody underestimates the power of ideas, always. It's a universal human trait. If you don't try to control them, you have a good chance for economic growth in the future. The absence of intellectual property was the reason for Germany's economic growth in the 19th century. It was the reason for the flourishing of literature all over America in the 19th century. It's the reason for why the computer industry grew and boomed all throughout the 1970s and 1980s, and most of the technologies we have today, like database systems and computer languages and all the rest of it, grow out of a period in which there was no enforcement of intellectual property at all. And the reason why this is very much slowing down today is because it's being enforced. It's very much like this rule I imposed on you early in the thing. I mean, if you can't talk to each other, there is no point to this conference. With intellectual property being enforced, an industry, an economy, a country, a civilization will die eventually. Okay, moving forward after Menger, we had Bumbarvik, who investigated the problem a little bit in one of his essays, and he asked the question, is a patent itself an economic good? Because he noticed that the early stages of patent enforcement in the German-speaking world, that some industries were trading patents with each other. Like you would get a patent to do something, and you would trade it away, give your rights away. He asked whether or not it was an economic good. He didn't come to any really firm conclusions, but at least he dealt with the problem. Mises, I should go next to Machlup, Fritz Machlup. It's not an Austrian we also often talk about. He was very interested in the subject of patents and copyrights and intellectual property. And he wrote several large-scale studies on the subject and concluded that they were unnecessary and did not help any economic growth at all. Mises himself was very good on the subject because he saw that patents and copyrights were nothing other than a grant of monopoly privilege to a single producer, and therefore constituted a kind of economic intervention. Typically with Mises, he didn't say specifically whether he was for them or against them completely, but he did name them as a grant of monopoly privilege by the state, which they are. Rothbard has a fabulous chapter in Man, Economy, and State in which he really went after the patents in particular and cited Fritz Machlup in all of his footnotes. And then in the 1970s, there are two thinkers in the Austrian libertarian world who you may never have heard of, who really took this analysis to a new level. One of them is named Samuel Konkin III. It's like Konkin, Samuel Konkin. You can look him up. I think in many ways was a great innovator in this area. He saw that there should not be any protection of intellectual property. And his kind of student was Wendy McElroy. And she very much throughout the 1980s had argued in favor of this position. So that's my brief history until 2001. In 2001, we are now about 6 years into the digital revolution. The web browser had been invented in 1995. By the way, does anybody know why why the internet had to be invented and the web browser had to be invented in 1995 in particular? Well, it's because that was the year that Murray Rothbard died. And God saw that there needed to be some way to save the cause of human liberty after this happened. So he gave us the web browser. That's the short history. So in 2001, an attorney named Stefan Kinsella wrote an article called Against Intellectual Property. It appeared in the Journal of Libertarian Studies. That was 11 years ago. And when I read this article, I thought he was crazy and that it had to be wrong. In fact, I was embarrassed. Do you know how libertarians sometimes get carried away talking about silly things? You know? Well, should there be private ownership on the moon? You know. What if I went to Pluto? Can I homestead that? You know. I thought this was one of those topics, like a silly topic, that a libertarian kind of gets carried away with his own logic. And I thought, oh, here we go again, you know. And I ignored the article for about 2 years. And then I saw what was happening in the digital world. The government was starting to enforce intellectual property for the first time and taking this freewheeling, happy environment of global sharing, creativity, and exchange, and was cracking down and saying, oh no, you can't do that. Google was trying to put every book that it was ever printed and put it online for the utopian dream of every intellectual to have a global library, like the Library of Alexandria, except for all of human knowledge in one database, and they were stopped. And then patents began to be enforced, and it became very difficult for anybody to invent anything new without asking permission. And this would be inadvertent. You know, the important point about intellectual property is not that it's just ownership, it's that it's exclusive ownership. You can use violence to prevent somebody else from coming up with the same idea, even if they never knew that you had that idea in the first place. So it's not just preventing sharing, it prevents simultaneous invention, too. Well, simultaneous invention is pretty much the way everything is invented in the whole of human history. I bet you can't name a single invention that can be proven to originate with one single individual and nobody else. In fact, almost all inventions are simultaneous because we all breathe the same air. Do you know of this stuff called silly putty? Maybe you don't. It's a little substance, and it's funny because it comes in an egg. And it bounces like a ball, bunk, bunk, and you can stretch it. And you can use it, put it on the newspaper and stick it. It's a perfectly stupid thing, okay? But anyway, I thought, well, surely this one has one person who invented it. Well, I looked it up. It turns out there are 3 people who claim to have invented silly putty, you know. And all 3 of them came along at the same time and invented silly putty at the same time. That's the way it works. Everything's usually invented by several. Even the marginal revolution was not just Menger, but Jevons and Walras also came up with the insight that led to the founding of the Austrian school. Anyway, so you can't. All intellectual property is enforced, you know, as an exclusive thing. So this meant that software innovators were prevented from having a kind of using their creative minds to do new things because people were claiming ownership over the ideas. So I began to read again Stefan's thing, and it took me truly about 6 years to finally come to the conclusion that he was exactly right about the topic. And then a new world opened up to me as never before. So I think the libertarian position, the Austrian position, has to be in favor of the abolition of intellectual property. But it's very difficult to conceive of. Now, maybe in Brazil it's a little bit easier for you because it's not very well heavily enforced. But in the United States, it is getting to the point of insanity. When I worked for the Mises Institute, I began to put many, many things online that had not previously been online before. And I ran into the problem of copyright, for example. Now, under copyright, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person who wrote the book is still around at all to enforce their rights. It doesn't have to be. The book could have come out in 1955, and then the author died, and his will was scattered among 20 different people, for example, none of whom had any particular interest in his book. So you think there would not be a problem in putting it online under these conditions? No, you may not put it online because it is still under protection from the US government. I mean, it's a kind of a censorship. And I began to notice this more and more and more, that more of the books I was trying to put it online were of this type. The author was dead, the children cared nothing about his work, and yet we were prevented by law from putting it online. Now, how is this any different from book burning? You know, it's no different from the way it's been throughout all history where governments have destroyed ideas because they didn't like them. I mean, we're in a position today where millions and millions of books, you can't see them. You can't get to them. And this is solely because of government controls. And it's gotten so bad today that if you put up a copyrighted work on your website, the government can come and just take down your domain, just shut you down overnight, call you a thief, and impose terrible penalties on you. In the United States, we call this body bagging. Do you know this term, body bagging? It comes from the movie, maybe you've seen it, called Brazil. And in the movie Brazil, the police will come in and drop down from the ceiling and then throw a bag over somebody, whoosh, like that, and zip them up, and take them out and take them to who knows where. And then later they come back to the family and give a receipt, right? Sorry about your husband. Here's your receipt. Okay. So in the United States now, we see more and more internet domains being body bagged just overnight, boom, just seized by the Department of Homeland Security, solely for because of the enforcement of intellectual property rights. Think of the irony. We all believe in property rights, don't we? We believe in private property. And the state now says, oh, sure, we too believe in private property. We believe in private property for ideas as a way of giving you incentive to create even more which makes no sense whatsoever. It does exactly the opposite. If we give you property rights and ideas, you will have ever more economic growth. Well, it's exactly the opposite. You have ever less economic growth. So, I mean, it's like everything the government says is like a lie, right? I mean, it's just, so here they've taken this idea of property rights and contorted it and distorted it and applied it to something that, to which it doesn't apply at all. I mean, it's a little bit like in the 19th century, we had a big debate in the United States over slavery, where some people said, well, my slave is nothing unusual about my slave. He's just simply my property, and he can't be taken from me. He's a private property like anything else. And so libertarians now understand that this is a preposterous claim, that there cannot be ownership of human beings in that sense. Well, we've had something similar come about in the area of intellectual property. The state has invented this idea and imposed it upon the world and claimed that it has to be constantly involved in our lives, prevent us from having the right of free speech, prevent you from having the right of innovation, prevent you from marketing your products and being creative, prevent you from extracting information from the world around you and using it in a way that you choose to benefit humanity. The state will prevent you from doing that in the name of the enforcement of property rights. Now, how preposterous is this? But many people over the years have been tricked by this. So I think one way that's very helpful for us to think about this issue, because intellectual property rights, as I say, is probably not as much a problem for you in Brazil, although I noticed in the market yesterday, I was walking along and a guy comes up to me and sort of gives me a nudge, and I thought, oh, you're going to try to steal my wallet, huh? Well, I've got that taken care of. I got it locked away. You're not going to get it. He said, no, no. And he opened up a cardboard thing, and he said, look. And inside this cardboard thing was pictures of movies and video games and software. And he said, don't you want to buy some movies or some games or software? And he, quickly closed it up like this, And he opens it again, So, it's terrible. This is a great entrepreneur. He's being forced to hide his goods. It's insane. So apparently he said, yes, I would like PlayStation. And he goes back, runs back to the back room and comes out with it, and takes the money and goes. He should be allowed to operate openly. I don't see any American movie studios or software manufacturers. I don't see Microsoft opening up an office in the markets in Sao Paulo. I mean, if they don't like what this guy is doing, they should open up their own shops, not send in the state to crack down and try to prevent this guy from serving you and me by selling us goods and services. It's an outrage. It's extremely important for all of us to understand this issue because, let me give you another example. Well, I don't want to get into trademarks. It gets too complicated. Another area is patents on medicines, which has been catastrophic. You know that patents on medicines are practically destroying American healthcare today. Because, yes, I see, yes. Because the drugs are ridiculously expensive. They're ridiculously, and you invent a new drug and it takes you something like 10 years, and during the period in which you're inventing the drug, you have to disclose all of the ingredients for everything you're doing. And you have to disclose this to your competitors. And you have to disclose this to the whole world and to the government itself, so they can test and make sure you're not really trying to kill people with your drug, because it's only the government that prevents drug manufacturers from aggressively trying to kill people with their drugs, So anyway, so then of course the drug maker wants a patent. He says, look, I've been spending $1 billion on this innovation. It's taken 10 years. Everybody knows about my recipe. I've already lost any advantage that comes from moving first in the market. So yeah, give me that patent. But then once they have the patent, they have this exclusive monopoly, and they can charge preposterous prices for the drugs. And then but the prices are not paid so much by the consumer, but rather by the health insurer, who in turn is extracting its own payments from the business for which you work. It's a terrible system. It's like a fascist socialist system. But a major problem here has to do with the patents. And then when the patent expires, the drug will go from like $300 or $500 for a little bottle to like $5 or $10. Boom, like that. A real market price arrives. Then you get all kinds of other distortions because people are inventing things all the time just so they can achieve a new monopoly. I mean, it leads to pointless innovations in all kinds of areas of life. The distortions are astonishing. It causes, when music goes into public domain, the publishers immediately change it enough so they can recopyright it and extract some more fees for its use. It's even true in such silly industries as shaving razors and things like this. Companies are constantly inventing new razors because they can get them patented and get a higher degree of profits than they would if the razor goes into the public domain. So it leads to very strange distortions of pointless innovations, of really robbery of consumers, of exploitation of the poor who are trying to make money. And quite frankly, the institution of intellectual property has corrupted many corporations operating all over the world, corrupted them, and led to a great deal of resentment against corporations that wouldn't otherwise be there. An excellent example of this is the American company called Monsanto. You know this company, Monsanto. Yeah, and it's a global company, so probably, but they patented seeds, and they've patented fertilizer. And if you're using their seeds, then you have to use their fertilizer. If you use their fertilizer, you have to use their seeds. And so it leads to a kind of almost turning a corporation into, and if you, as an entrepreneur, reverse engineer and figure out how this seed is made and make it yourself, you'll be subject to criminal penalties. So it turns a corporation, which would, in a free market, be a fabulous producer of human well-being, relying on your voluntary wishes to buy and sell their services, and leading to vast economic growth. Great institutions of human benevolence are now seen as exploitative institutions that are using violence to impose their will on the world. This, to me, is a great tragedy, and it's what's led to things like the Occupy Wall Street movement, in part. So it's a corruption of capitalism, and it is completely out of control. There is so much more to say about this, and I would love to say more, but my time is up. Let me just lead you to one final point that I want you to think about this issue of intellectual property. How would the world work in its absence? And there are examples out there for us. One of them, in the United States in any case, is called the fashion industry. The fashion industry. One of the most fabulous industries and growing, booming industries in the entire United States. Very creative and extremely innovative. There are no copyrights or patents at all for clothing, designs, or colors, or anything else in the United States. And as a result, it is one of the most fantastically innovative and creative institutions there is. So this is the reason for the runway. You know the runway where the... Okay. So the reason for the runway is that every designer wants to wait and only reveal his new designs at a specified moment in time, right? So the spring fashions are coming out, so you have to wait like 5 months before the spring fashions come out, and now it's the big party, and here comes Ralph Lauren's new stuff, and up come the lights, out comes the music, doom, 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 doom. You know, here comes the people walking down the runway, and it's fantastic. Everybody's, oh, wow, look at the great designs. You know? But the photographers are all taking pictures, right? The whole time? And what happens to these pictures? They immediately are shipped all around the world so that people can copy the designs. So Ralph Lauren's doesn't have that long to get his stuff into production. I mean, like, he's already produced it, and it's already being shipped to the stores. And so within the next couple of weeks, the people who are willing to pay very high prices for clothes rush to the stores and get the newest things that they just saw on the runway so they can be the coolest kids in town, right, with the newest stuff. And then 6 months later, you go to the Walmart and you find the same thing for a tiny fraction of the price, right? Stolen ideas. Fabulous. It's the best thing that could ever happen to the world today. More stealing, more stealing. All the best. Socialism, it's beautiful in the world of ideas. It works. So what does Ralph Lauren do? Now he's got to think about the next season, and the next season, and the next season. Now, if you were an intellectual with tenure, trying to think through how this system would work, you would say, it will not work. This system will not work. Nobody would ever invent anything new. We must give a monopoly to Ralph Lauren's clothing designs, his colors, his shapes, his styles, everything. We must give a monopoly, or else this industry will die. Well, guess what? The free market is smarter than any intellectual. It is brilliant. It is more brilliant than the most tenured professor, the most awarded, brilliant professor. This free market itself has figured things out that you and I can't figure out. For some reason, this system of freedom works. It works in this industry. And it would work in every industry if we would let it happen. So I'm going to stop there because I'm out of time, and I think I can take some questions?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
A pergunta é a seguinte: assim como a ausência de patente desestimula a pesquisa e a produção inicial, a ausência de propriedade intelectual não desestimularia pesquisas e o conhecimento?
One. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, this is the basic question. If we don't have property rights and ideas, won't this discourage innovation? I mean, this is, I think, the basic question that everybody asks. If we have a free market and ideas, won't people be discouraged? There are so many different ways to answer this thing. The first one, I guess, is to refer to empirical realities, which is that there is not a single rigorous study ever done on the subject that has concluded that a free market and ideas will discourage the creation of ideas, or that patents and copyrights will encourage the creation of more rather than less. That's the first thing to point out. And in this regard, I would strongly recommend to you a book by Boldrine and Levine called Against Intellectual Monopoly, when they point this out. But let's just forget about the empirical stuff and just think about the reality. From a logical point of view. As free market thinkers, we understand that competition is productive. What leads to a proliferation of goods and services? Monopoly or competition, right? If you have a monopoly, what happens? There's always less. There's always just one, and it harms economic growth. It harms innovation in particular. I mean, go back to this scenario where I assigned each of you rights to your individual ideas. It would be hard enough to decide ownership, right? And then to get exchange going between you? I mean, it would be virtually impossible. But what about new ideas? I mean, how are you going to combine two ideas into one new one? That would become almost impossible, because we have something like 300 individual monopolies here. No, it doesn't work. The only way to encourage innovation really is competition. And in some ways, competition is a cruel and wicked system. It's a system that is constantly conspiring to reduce profits to zero. In fact, that's what capitalism is. I mean, I think you can define capitalism as a vast conspiracy to reduce all profits to zero for producers. It's true. That's why it's hard as heck to be a merchant. It is very hard to be a business person, because everything you do, you are broadcasting to the world, copy me, do what I do, do what I do, and you can be just as profitable as I am. It sounds like it's not going to work, right? Competition. This is why it's so difficult to have competitive systems. I mean, most producers never like this. I mean, for example, go back to the fashion industry. What if you went to Ralph Lauren and you said to the company, we should grant you a monopoly, a copyright and a patent on all your designs. What do you think the Ralph Lauren company would say to that? Would they be for it? Or would they be against it? What do you think? I think they would be very much for it. It would be good for them because it would extend the time period in which the company itself can make as much money as possible. The time period in which its profitability can be sustained at an unnaturally high level because it reduces competition. But this will not lead to innovation. In fact, innovation comes from the fear of being copied. The fear that somebody else is going to learn to do exactly what you do and take away your markets. So you have to constantly stay innovative. So I think the truth is exactly opposite. And I'm going to take another question, but let me just say this. There are two sides to every active business. There's a private side and a public side. On the private side, you can make profits or you can make losses. You bear those losses yourself, and those profits you can keep for yourself. On the public side, you're giving away all of your information all the time. You're giving away the secret to your success all the time. And this is what's often forgotten. And it's because the information is free. You're broadcasting to the world, if you do what I do, you might be able to make money in the same way I do. This is the public side of capitalism that is not often talked about. There's a private side. You can keep the profits. The public side is you have to give away the secrets to your success. Why? Because you're seeking customers. And when you're seeking customers, you have to advertise. I told the story recently of a barbershop in my town, a barbershop that cuts hair. And this barbershop put a pool table in the barbershop so you can play pool before and after getting your hair cut. And so lots of guys are going to get their haircuts there, right? It's really great. The downside for this barbershop, they're making high profits. The downside is that they're telling every other barbershop in town, hey, you put a pool table in your shop, you can get the guys coming in too. So sure enough, now we're seeing other places get pool tables in their shops, thereby diminishing the amount of productivity. So what does this cause the original barbershop to have to? Now they have to have other innovations, like a ping pong table, or darts, or maybe, I don't know what else. Maybe you can just let your mind run wild, thinking all the things the barbershops could do. Anyway, yeah, okay.
Okay. Numa sociedade onde não há direito de patentes, qual será a motivação para indústrias farmacêuticas criarem novos remédios, novos medicamentos?
Oh yeah, okay, now this question is an important one, because the question started off, in a society without patents, what would be the motivation? And that's an easy one to answer. But then he continued on with the question for inventing new drugs. Okay, this is a very special case, and we need to think about this. In the first place, there are many, many unpatentable things out there that, like if you go to a drugstore in the United States, you will see a name brand like Tucker's Tablets. And then right next to it, you will see plain old tablets. And Tucker's tablets are like $5, and plain old tablets are like $1. It's the same thing, right? But for some reason, consumers always go for Tucker's tablets over plain old tablets. I do this all the time. It's a little bit crazy. So you can have name brand things existing side by side with what's called generic drugs. But aside from that, drugs constitute a very special case in the world of patents, because if you're going to eliminate patents for drugs, you also have to eliminate the requirement that the drug manufacturer constantly disclose all of its ingredients and its processes and the scientific methods that went into making them all along the way. Do you see what I mean? We've got mandates that force these companies to reveal all of its secrets. And so therefore they are missing that the advantages that come with being the first mover in the market. So it would not be enough, unfortunately, to just get rid of patents, because as the question implies, inventing new drugs is an enormously costly undertaking. It takes many, many years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, 20 years more, and billions of dollars. So if a company is going to recoup that kind of costs associated with drug manufacturing, then it's going to have to be in a position to be able to hold secret some aspects of its production. This is why they seek protection, patent protection. So we have to eliminate two laws at once. This is often true, isn't it? In the government, with government intervention, the government intervenes so much that it's never enough just to eliminate one thing. You know, you have to eliminate many, many other things too. Like if you eliminate minimum wages, maybe then you also have to eliminate child labor laws, or everything's kind of tied together. That's why it'd be better if we had a big button right here on the stage, we could just press it, poof, and create a total free market instantly. Then the world would be a happy, wonderful place.
Muito bem, agora tem pergunta da plateia, não é? Vou encontrar ali.
I'm Einstein do Nascimento. I'm a computer engineering. I want to put some ideas from the programs in computer programming there. Like, if someone stole my source code or something like that and can reproduce with my code, like, or know the idea and can reproduce, is the same thing that the thing that you are doing, and the comparison of a great a great book from a writer, like he spends 2 years and like thinking a lot and resumes everything in one great book of 100 pages, and then people can copy it and and give away. I want to know that thing too. And the other thing is, like you say about the runaway and the cloth design thing, but all the brands, they have if you copy the brand, or like Lacoste or something like that, you can put it on jail and something like that. Look, so they have the trademark stuff that you kind of didn't say about. So
Yeah, you know, on this trademark thing, you know, I'm thinking more and more that I need a trademark over my name. You know, there's a guy in Brazil who claims to be the Jeffrey Tucker of Brazil. I wonder, is that a violation of my rights? You know. Okay, no, the question's very important, and I'm glad you asked it, because I want to be clear that just because information has the capacity for infinite reproducibility doesn't necessarily mean that a producer has to allow this to happen and never intervene. Do you see what I mean? So if you create a source code for a new software, you say, well, somebody could reverse engineer this and put this out. What you should do as a manufacturer is try to provide ways to prevent that from happening, ways that do not use the state. Okay, so they're very, I mean, and in fact, in the software industry, this is going on all the time. I mean, Microsoft, for years, has been putting out its Office program, right? But in the early years of its Office program, 2003, and some of these, you could make infinite numbers of copies of these things. Now, it's true that you weren't supposed to, right? But people did it anyway. But as time has gone on, Microsoft has become ever more sophisticated about tying the operation of its software with a special code, and the codes are severely limited. So the code that activates the software becomes a scarce good. So they're taking a non-scarce good software and scarcifying it. Do you see what I mean? They're introducing scarcity into a realm that would otherwise be unscarce, and they're doing this for the purpose of making a business for themselves. Is there anything wrong with this? So I would say absolutely not, that this is completely compatible with a market system. to artificially make something scarce that would, in a world without your business plan, would be non-scarce. So as a businessman in the digital world, it becomes extremely important to you to figure out what things you want to give away and what things you want to find the technological way to restrict. This is the whole key to doing business in the digital age. It's hard to know which. All I'm saying is that the worst possible way to do this is by doing the state. For one thing, it doesn't often work. In fact, it doesn't work at all, and it discourages other people from emulating your success in creating very similar programs, and therefore leads into a decline of economic growth. Now, it's true that private means of restricting infinite copying don't always work either. I mean, if I'm extremely entrepreneurial, I can find a copy of Office 2010 for free. If you gave me about an hour and a half and set me with a computer right in front of me, I would eventually find a way to get that program pirated. But I don't really want to do that. I mean, that just takes too long. I would probably rather just go buy the thing, and that way I get upgrades, right? That's something else that comes with licit branded software. You get constant upgrades and services and all sorts of things. So it's a matter of finding the right business model that allows you to take what would otherwise be an infinite good and making it a finite good through technological means. And I don't want to say that just because something is an infinite good, that therefore you have to always allow it to be that way. As long as you're using private means to restrict, that's fine. Now, this isn't always wise. For example, in many firms, you have non-disclosure agreements, and you have non-compete clauses in many firms when you go to work for them. These can be good, or they can be bad. I think in lots of cases, they are very bad for an industry because they lead people to tend to stick to a single firm and not change jobs, so that firms end up being kind of too internal and not getting enough outside influence, enough rotation. But these are decisions that are management decisions within the context of a free market. There's nothing that violates any rights with something like a non-disclosure clause or a non-compete clause. It's perfectly fine to use private means to inspire, to restrict your good and increase your selling price and therefore your profits. There's nothing wrong with using the free market and technological means to do this, so long as you don't use the state. Clogging up the system and destroying productivity and creativity. Yeah.
Muito bem, vamos então aplaudir Jeffrey Tucker. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.